My name's Loretta Jackson, and I'm 66. What I'm about to tell you turned my life upside down. Clarence's funeral was the quietest day of my life. Standing there, beside his grave, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number sent a shiver right through me. Asterisk, I'm alive. That's not me in the casket. My hands were shaking so hard it felt like the ground itself was about to give way beneath me. Asterisk, who are you? Asterisk, I typed back. The reply took my breath away. Asterisk, I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our sons. That message ripped my heart in two. My whole world crumbled when I saw Darius and Malik, my own boys, standing by the casket, looking unnervingly calm. Something was seriously wrong. Their tears seemed forced, their hugs cold as ice. For 42 years, Clarence had been my everything, my partner, my refuge, the reason I breathed. I met him when I was 24, in the little town of Spring Creek. We grew up on the same dusty backroads, sharing simple dreams. I cleaned houses to help Mom, while Clarence fixed bikes in the little shop he'd inherited from his dad. We were flat broke, but we were happy. We had something money couldn't buy, real love. I remember the first time he spoke to me. It was a Tuesday morning. I was heading to the market in my faded green dress and worn-out shoes. He stepped out of his shop, grease on his hands, and smiled at me with a shyness that made my heart melt. "Good morning, Loretta," he said softly. "Need me to give your bike a once-over?" I didn't own a bike, but I cooked up an excuse just to talk to him. That conversation led to dates under the big old oak tree in Town Square Park, then to promises of forever, and finally, a simple wedding filled with hope. The first few years were tough. We lived in a little two-bedroom place with a tin roof. When it rained, we'd have pots scattered everywhere catching the leaks, but we were happy. Clarence worked from dawn till dusk in his shop, and I sewed clothes for the women in town. When Darius was born, I thought my heart would burst with joy. He was a beautiful baby, with his dad's big eyes and my smile. 2 years later, Malik arrived, just as perfect. I raised them with all the love in the world, putting their needs before my own. Clarence was a wonderful dad. He'd take them fishing on Sundays, teach them to fix things, and tell them stories at bedtime. I fed them, clothed them, and comforted them when they cried. We were a close family, or so I thought. As they grew, things started to change. Darius, the eldest, was always ambitious. From a young age, he'd ask why we lived so modestly, why we didn't have a car like other families. Malik followed his lead, just like always. When Darius turned 18, Clarence offered him a job at the shop, but he turned it down with disdain. "I don't want to get my hands dirty like you, Dad. I'm going to be someone important." Those words stung Clarence deeply, though he never let on to me. I'd see him sitting on the porch at night, staring at the stars with a look of sadness. His son had rejected not just his work, but his whole way of life. The years flew by, and to my surprise, Darius made a name for himself in the business world. He landed a job with a real estate firm in the city. Malik followed soon after. They both started making serious money, far more than Clarence and I ever dreamed of. At first, I was bursting with pride. My sons had achieved what we never could, escaping poverty and building a better life. But slowly, that joy turned to sorrow. Visits became less frequent, phone calls shorter. When they did come, they arrived in fancy cars, wearing expensive suits, talking about investments and properties. They'd look at us with a strange mix of pity and shame. "Mom," Darius said during one of their rare visits, "you and Dad should move somewhere better. This house is falling apart." He was right. But that house held all our memories. It was where we'd raised our sons, shared thousands of meals, grown old together. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. Clarence, always wise, would say, "Loretta, money's changed our boys. We're not enough for them anymore." I refused to believe it. I kept making excuses for their absences, their brief calls, their broken promises. "They're busy building their lives," I'd tell myself. Asterisk, someday, they'll be the loving boys we raised again. Asterisk, but deep down, I knew Clarence was right. We'd lost our sons long before I lost my husband. I just didn't know the full extent to which we'd become strangers. The biggest change came when Darius married Shanice Albright, a city woman who never hid her contempt for our simple life. The first time he brought her home, she arrived in high heels, sinking into the dirt of our porch, wearing an elegant red dress that cost more than everything I owned. "Nice to meet you," she said with a strained smile, barely touching my hand. Her eyes scanned our humble home with an expression I couldn't decipher, but it made me feel small. During dinner, Shanice barely touched the food I'd made with so much love. She pushed the meatloaf around her plate, cut tiny pieces of chicken, but ate almost nothing. Darius seemed nervous, constantly apologizing for things he'd never been ashamed of before. "Next time we'll take them out to a restaurant," he whispered to Shanice, thinking I couldn't hear. I did. Every word felt like a knife to my heart. Malik remained single, but adopted the same distant attitude as his brother. His visits were limited to special occasions, and even then, he was always in a hurry to leave. He was constantly on his phone, closing deals, even during our conversations. "Mom, I have to go," he'd say before it was time. "I have an important meeting early tomorrow." Family Sundays became a distant memory. Christmases grew cold and formal. My sons would bring expensive gifts we didn't need. They'd stay for 2 or 3 hours, then leave with obvious relief. Clarence and I grew old alone, comforting each other. He continued working in his shop, though his hands weren't as strong. I kept sewing, but my eyes weren't what they used to be. We made do with our small income, proud not to ask for anything from our successful sons. "Do you know what the saddest part is, Loretta?" Clarence said one night as we drank coffee on the porch. "It's not that they have money, it's that the money's made them believe we're not important anymore." He was right, as always. My sons hadn't just changed financially, they'd changed inside. We were no longer their beloved parents. We were an uncomfortable reminder of a past they wanted to forget. Things got worse when Darius bought a $200,000 house in an exclusive neighborhood in the city. Malik did the same soon after, investing in a luxury condo for $150,000. Suddenly, my sons were rolling in money we couldn't even imagine. "You should sell this house and move into a retirement community," Shanice suggested during one of her rare visits. "There are some very nice places for people your age. You'd be more comfortable." The word community hit me like a slap. A retirement community? After 40 years of building our home, after raising these sons with so much love, they wanted to send us to a home. "We don't need a home," Clarence replied with the dignity that always defined him. "We're fine here in our house." But I saw the look on Darius and Malik's faces. They agreed with Shanice. To them, we were a burden, a problem to be solved easily. That's when the more direct suggestions started. Darius arrived one day with papers in his hand, documents he'd prepared without consulting us. "Dad, Mom," he said with that practiced, fake smile. "I've been thinking about your future. This house is worth, at most, $1,000. If you sell it, I can add some money so you can move somewhere better, a nicer place." To us, there was no place better than the home where we'd been happy for decades. But Darius didn't understand that. For him, everything came down to numbers, to monetary value. "Besides," he continued, "I think Dad should retire from the shop. He's already 70. It's time to rest." Clarence looked at him with infinite sadness. "Son, working isn't a burden for me. It's what keeps me alive, what gives meaning to my days." "But you could get hurt," Malik insisted, backing his brother, as always. "At your age, an accident would be very dangerous." Their words sounded caring, but I sensed something else behind them, an impatience, an urgency I couldn't quite grasp. The following months were tense. My sons increased the pressure to sell the house. They brought real estate agents without telling us. They had it appraised without our permission. They even started talking about what would be best for everyone. "Look," Darius said to us during one particularly uncomfortable dinner, Shanice and I have decided to have kids soon. We'll need help with the expenses. If you sell the house and move to a smaller place, that money could be an early inheritance. An early inheritance? He was asking for our inheritance while we were still alive. The audacity left me speechless. Clarence remained calm, but I saw his jaw clench. Son, he said, when your mother and I die, everything we have will be yours. But while we're alive, our decisions are our own. Don't be stubborn, Malik cut in, with a harshness I'd never seen from him before. You're old now. You can't keep living in the past. That night, after they left, Clarence and I talked until dawn. For the first time in our marriage, we discussed the possibility that our sons weren't the people we thought we'd raised. Something's wrong, Loretta, my husband said, with a worried look I'd never seen in his eyes. This isn't just ambition or impatience. There's something darker behind all this pressure. I had no idea how right he was. I was standing on the edge of a nightmare darker than anything I had ever imagined. I couldn't imagine that my own sons were planning something that would change our lives forever. I didn't know that the tragedy to come wouldn't be an accident of fate, but a conspiracy carefully orchestrated by the two people I trusted most in the world. The last normal conversation I had with Darius was 3 weeks before Clarence's death. He came alone, without Shanice, and looked more serious than usual. Mom, he said, sitting at the kitchen table where he'd eaten breakfast so many times as a boy. I want you to know that no matter what happens, Malik and I will always take care of you. His words soothed me then, but now, remembering them beside Clarence's grave, they send a shiver down my spine. Asterisk, why did he say, no matter what happens? What did he know that I didn't? The accident that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning. Clarence had left early for the shop, as he had every day for over 40 years. I was in the kitchen preparing his favorite lunch, meatloaf and mash, when the phone rang with an urgency that sent a chill down my spine. Mrs. Hayes, a voice I didn't recognize, asked. I'm calling from Memorial Hospital. Your husband's been in a serious accident. You need to come immediately. The words blurred in my mind like ink and water. The world stopped. My legs turned to jelly, and I had to grab the door frame to keep from falling. Asterisk, what happened? Is he okay? Is he alive? Is he in ICU? Ma'am, please come as soon as possible. The trip to the hospital was a hazy nightmare. My neighbor, Miss Thelma, had to drive me because I was shaking so much I couldn't even hold the keys. The whole way there, my mind refused to process what was happening. Clarence was careful, meticulous in his work. How could this have happened? When we got to the hospital, Darius and Malik were already there. That surprised me, because no one had notified them yet. At least, not me. But in my desperation, I didn't pay attention to that detail. Mom, Darius said, hugging me with a force that seemed genuine. Dad's in bad shape. The doctors say one of the machines at the shop exploded. He has severe burns and a traumatic brain injury. Malik's eyes were red, but something in his expression felt off. He seemed more nervous than sad, like someone waiting for important news rather than someone grieving for his father. Can we see him? I asked, desperate. Only immediate family, one at a time, and for 5 minutes max, the nurse explained. When I entered that ICU room, my heart sank. Clarence was hooked up to a dozen machines, with bandages covering most of his face and arms. I barely recognized him. His breathing was labored, artificial, kept going by machines that beeped constantly. I walked up to his bed and took his hand, the only part of his body that seemed intact. Clarence, my love, I'm here. Everything's going to be all right. You're going to recover, just like you always do. For a moment, I felt a slight squeeze in my hand. His eyes moved behind his closed lids. He was fighting. My warrior was fighting to get back to me. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I practically lived at the hospital, sleeping in the uncomfortable chairs in the waiting room. Darius and Malik took turns accompanying me, but they always seemed more interested in talking to the doctors than in comforting their father. I overheard fragmented conversations that I couldn't fully understand at the time. Malik asked about medical insurance, about the cost of treatment. Darius was on the phone talking about life insurance policies and beneficiaries. Mom, Darius said to me on the second day, we reviewed Dad's insurance. He has a life insurance policy for $50,000. There's also a workers' comp policy that could cover up to another $75,000. Why was he talking to me about money when Clarence was still fighting for his life? Why was he worried about insurance instead of his father's recovery? I don't care about the money, I responded sharply. I just want your dad to get better. Of course, Mom, he said, but I saw something in his eyes I didn't like. A coldness, a calculator working while his father lay dying. On the third day, the doctors gave us the most devastating news of my life. Dr. Freeman, an older man with a compassionate expression, gathered us in a small office. Mrs. Hayes, he began softly. Your husband's condition is critical. The burns have become infected, and the head trauma is more severe than we initially thought. We have to be realistic about his chances. What does that mean? I asked, though my heart already knew the answer. It means we need to prepare for the worst. Your husband is in an induced coma. We could keep him alive indefinitely, but his quality of life, well, it's highly unlikely he will ever regain consciousness. My world fell apart around me. 42 years of marriage, an entire life built together. And now they were telling me it was all fading away like smoke. We want to try everything, I said through sobs. No matter the cost, no matter how long it takes. But Darius exchanged a look with Malik that deeply unsettled me. Mom, Darius said in a voice that tried to sound understanding. We have to be practical. Dad wouldn't want to live like this. He always said he never wanted to be a burden on anyone. A burden? I exploded with a fury I didn't know I possessed. He's your father. He's not a burden. He's the man who raised you, who worked his whole life to give you the best he could. We know, Mom, Malik chimed in. But we also have to think about you. The medical bills are going to be enormous. They could wipe out all your savings. Again, money, always money. My husband was dying, and they were calculating costs. That night, alone in the hospital room, I took Clarence's hand and spoke to him as if he could hear me. My love, I don't know what to do. The doctors say there's no hope, but I can't let you go. I can't imagine my life without you. It was then that something happened that still gives me goosebumps. His fingers moved slightly, squeezing mine with a force that was almost imperceptible. His lips moved as if he were trying to say something, but no sound came out. I called for the nurses, desperate. He's reacting. He's trying to talk. But by the time they arrived, Clarence had returned to his previous state. The nurse checked the monitors and shook her head. Sometimes there are involuntary muscle spasms, ma'am. It doesn't mean he's conscious. But I knew what I had felt. Clarence had tried to communicate with me. He had fought to tell me something important. 2 days later, in the early hours of Friday morning, the machine alarms went off. Lights flashed. Nurses rushed to Clarence's room. I was dozing in the hallway when the noise woke me up. No, 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 I screamed, running towards the room. The doctors worked for 40 minutes trying to resuscitate him, but it was useless. At 4:37 a.m., Clarence was officially declared dead. The pain I felt in that moment was physical, as if my heart had been ripped from my chest. I collapsed by his bed, hugging his still warm body, refusing to accept that he was gone forever. Darius and Malik arrived at the hospital an hour after their father's death. They seemed prepared, as if they'd been expecting the call. They brought papers, documents, and phone numbers for funeral homes. We already talked to the Spring Creek Funeral Home, Darius said to me while I was still crying inconsolably. They can pick up the body this morning. We also contacted the insurance, Malik added. The claim process is already underway. How could they be so efficient, so organized, so cold, just an hour after losing their father? Something was wrong. But my grief was so intense that I couldn't think clearly. The funeral was scheduled for the following Monday. Darius took care of all the arrangements without really consulting me. He chose the simplest casket, the shortest service, as if he wanted to get it all over with as quickly as possible. "It's what Dad would have wanted," he said when I complained about not being included in the decisions. "Something simple, without a fuss." But Clarence deserved better than this indecent rush to bury him and forget. The day of the funeral arrived, cloudy and cold, as if the sky itself were crying for Clarence. I wore my only black dress, the same one I'd worn for my mother's funeral years ago. My hands were shaking so much that Miss Thelma had to help me button the small buttons on the back. "Be strong, Loretta," my dear friend whispered as she carefully combed my hair. "Clarence would want to see you strong." But I didn't feel strong. I felt empty, like a shell without a soul. 42 years of marriage can't be buried so easily. Every object in the house reminded me of him. His coffee mug on the table, his tools on the porch, his pillow that still held his scent. When we got to the cemetery, I was surprised by how few people had attended. I expected to see more of Clarence's coworkers from the shop, more neighbors, more acquaintances, but it was only Darius, Malik, Shanice, Miss Thelma, me, and the pastor. For a man who'd lived 70 years in the same town, who'd helped so many people, the funeral seemed strangely empty. "Where are the guys from the shop?" I asked Darius. "We didn't want to bother anyone," he replied quickly. Dad was a private person. He would have preferred something intimate. But that wasn't true. Clarence loved his community. He cared about his neighbors. He would have wanted them to come say goodbye. Why had Darius decided to make everything so secretive, so rushed? During the service, I watched my sons with a strange emotional detachment. Darius had a solemn expression appropriate for the occasion, but his eyes constantly darted towards his watch. Malik seemed restless, as if he had more important things to do. Shanice discreetly checked her phone behind her black veil. This was how they were saying goodbye to their father, with impatience and distractions. The pastor spoke about eternal life, about well-deserved rest, about reuniting with God. His words felt hollow in my shattered heart. I didn't want Clarence to rest in peace. I wanted him to come home with me, for us to keep growing old together, for us to keep drinking coffee on the porch every evening. When it was time to throw dirt on the casket, my legs refused to hold me up. Miss Thelma had to support me as I sobbed uncontrollably. The sound of the dirt hitting the wood was final, conclusive, hopeless. It was at that exact moment, standing by my husband's grave, that my phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. Asterisk, "I'm alive." That's not me in the casket. My heart stopped. The letters danced in front of my eyes as if I were hallucinating. I was losing my mind from the grief. With trembling hands, I replied, "Asterisk, who are you?" The answer came immediately. Asterisk, "I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our sons." The phone fell from my hands as if it were burning. Miss Thelma bent down to pick it up, but I stopped her abruptly. I couldn't let anyone else see those messages. Not until I understood what was happening. "Are you okay, Mum?" Darius asked, approaching with a worried expression. I stared at him, trying to find some clue on his face. His eyes seemed sincere, but now every gesture, every word, every expression felt suspicious. "I'm fine," I lied, putting the phone in my purse. "I just need to go home." On the way back, I couldn't get those messages out of my head. Was it possible that someone was playing a cruel joke at the worst moment of my life? Or was there really a possibility that Clarence was alive? But if he was alive, who had we buried? And if he wasn't alive, who knew enough details about our lives to write something so specific about our sons? That night, alone in my house, which now felt like a tomb, I reviewed every detail of the last few days. Clarence's accident had been strange from the beginning. According to Darius, a machine had exploded in the little shop, but Clarence knew it inside and out, every screw, every wire. He was a stickler for maintenance, a fanatic about safety. Which made me wonder, How on earth did my sons get to the hospital so fast? No one had notified them. The hospital called me first. I was the emergency contact. How did they beat me to the news? Then there was the money. From the get-go, Darius and Malik had been going on about insurance policies and beneficiaries, like they'd been waiting for this, prepping for it. I decided to go through Clarence's papers. He kept everything important: insurance policies, the house deeds, shop records, the lot, locked in a metal box inside his old wooden desk. I found the $50,000 life insurance policy Darius had mentioned. But something was amiss. The policy had been updated just 6 months prior, boosted from a measly $5,000 to a whopping $50,000. Why the sudden jump? Clarence never mentioned it, and more importantly, who'd suggested it. I dug deeper, and what I unearthed was even more unsettling. A workers' compensation policy I knew nothing about, taken out a mere 2 months before his death. $5,000 for accidental death on the job, $15,000 total. A small fortune for us, but enough to tempt someone without a conscience. My phone buzzed again. Another message from that same unknown number. Check the bank account. See who's been moving money. This time, I didn't hesitate. This person, whoever they were, knew far too much for it to be a prank. They knew about the insurance, my sons, details only someone very close to us would know. The next day, I went to the bank, where Clarence and I had banked for 30 years. Mrs. Jenkins, the manager, who'd known us forever, greeted me with heartfelt condolences. "Loretta, I'm so sorry about Clarence. He was a good bloke." "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. I'm here to check our accounts. I need to understand our financial situation." She pulled up the bank statements for the last 6 months. What I saw stopped me dead in my tracks. Over the previous 3 months, there'd been substantial withdrawals from our savings account. $1,000 in January, $3,000 in February, and $4,000 in March. Money I knew nothing about. Who authorized these withdrawals? I asked, my voice shaking. "Your husband came in person," Mrs. Jenkins explained. "He said he needed the money for repairs at the shop. But I kept the household accounts. I knew exactly how much we had and what we spent. Clarence never mentioned expensive shop repairs, and we certainly never discussed withdrawing thousands from our savings." "Do you have the signatures for those withdrawals?" I asked. She showed me the receipts. They looked like Clarence's signature, but something about the handwriting felt off. It was too shaky, too hesitant for his usually firm, clear script. "Mrs. Jenkins," I asked, my heart pounding, "did he come alone to make these withdrawals, or was someone with him?" She thought for a moment. "Now that you mention it, I think he came in with one of your sons once or twice. Darius, I think. He said he was helping his dad with the paperwork because Clarence was having trouble reading without his glasses. Darius, my son, had been involved in money withdrawals I knew nothing about, using his father's eyesight as an excuse. But Clarence saw perfectly well with his glasses, which he never took off during the day." That afternoon, as I pored over the bank statements, another message arrived. The insurance was their idea. They convinced Clarence he needed more protection for you. It was a trap. I couldn't ignore the evidence mounting before me. The mysteriously increased insurance policies, the unauthorized money withdrawals, Darius's presence in transactions I knew nothing about. His suspicious efficiency in organizing the funeral, his coldness during his father's suffering. But the question that truly terrified me was whether they'd actually planned Clarence's death, how they'd done it, and who was sending me these messages. How did this person know so much? The following days were a nightmare of doubt and suspicion. Every one of Darius's smiles, every one of Malik's hugs, every word of condolence felt like a mask concealing something sinister. But I needed more proof before I could accept a truth as horrifying as the one forming in my mind. My phone continued to receive messages from the mysterious number. "Go to Clarence's shop. Look in his desk. There are things you didn't see." I decided to go to the shop for the first time since the accident. Darius had said a machine had exploded. But what I found was completely unexpected. The shop was eerily clean, too clean for the scene of an explosion. No burn marks on the walls, no debris, no signs of the destruction such a serious accident should have caused. Where is the machine that exploded? I asked aloud. I searched the shop, finding every machine in its place, working perfectly. The welder, the compressor, the electric saw, all intact. So, what had caused the accident? In Clarence's desk, I found something that sent a shiver down my spine. A note, in his handwriting, dated 3 days before his death. Darius insists I need more insurance. He says it's for Margot. But something doesn't feel right. I don't trust his intentions. Below that note was another. Malik brought me some papers to sign. He says they're to modernize the shop, but I don't understand what it's about. Why all the hurry? My husband had had suspicions. He'd sensed the evil intentions of our sons, but he died before he could tell me. I kept searching and found an envelope addressed to me. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a letter from Clarence. My dearest Loretta, if you are reading this, it means something has happened to me. In recent months, I've noticed strange changes in Darius and Malik. They're too interested in our money, in the insurance, in us selling the house. Shanice is putting a lot of pressure on them. Yesterday, Darius told me I should be more concerned about my safety because at my age, any accident could be fatal. I don't know why, but those words sounded like a threat. I love you, Loretta. If something happens to me, don't trust anyone blindly, not even our sons. The letter slipped from my grasp. Clarence had sensed his own death. He'd seen the signs I, blinded by maternal love, had ignored. That night, Darius came to visit, arriving with a bottle of wine and a smile that now seemed utterly fake. Mom, I've been thinking about your future, he said, pouring himself a glass without asking if I wanted one. The insurance money. It's already in process. It'll be $15,000. How do you know the exact amount? I asked, feigning innocence. Well, I helped Dad with the insurance paperwork. He wanted to make sure you had enough money to live comfortably. A lie. Clarence had never wanted to increase the insurance. According to his note, he'd been pressured by Darius. And what do you think I should do with that money? I asked, carefully watching his reaction. His eyes lit up with a chilling gleam. You could buy a smaller, cozier house, or even better, move into a nice retirement community where you'd have company and medical care. Malik and I could manage your money to make it go further. Manage my money. They just wanted to take care of me, or so they claimed. Let me think about it, I said, buying time. Of course, Shanice chimed in with her fake sweetness. But not too long. For your own good. After they left, I sat in my kitchen, shaking with rage and fear. My own sons, my flesh and blood, had not only murdered their father, but now they were planning to steal everything I had left. That night, my phone vibrated with a longer message than the others. Tomorrow, go to the police station. Ask for the report on Clarence's accident. There are contradictions you need to know about. The next day, I went to the local police station. Sergeant Williams, who had known Clarence for years, greeted me kindly. The report on your husband's accident? He asked with a confused expression. What accident, Mrs. Hayes? From his shop. When the machine exploded. The sergeant checked his files and shook his head. We don't have any report of an explosion at Clarence's shop here. In fact, we don't have any report of a work accident involving your husband. I felt the world tilt beneath me. But my son said it was an accident at the shop. That's why he was in the hospital. Mrs. Hayes, your husband arrived at the hospital on Tuesday morning, but not from a work accident. According to the medical report I have here, he arrived unconscious with symptoms of poisoning. Poisoning. The doctors found traces of methanol in his blood, enough to cause blindness, brain damage, and eventually death. The hospital should have informed me of this poisoning. It hadn't been an explosion. It hadn't been a work accident. Someone had deliberately poisoned my husband. Why didn't anyone tell me this? I asked, my voice breaking. The immediate family who signed the hospital papers requested that the information be kept confidential to avoid unnecessary speculation. They said you were too emotionally fragile to handle the technical details. The immediate family. Darius and Malik had hidden the true cause of Clarence's condition, invented the story of the explosion, and manipulated everyone, including me, to cover up a murder. Mrs. Hayes, the sergeant continued, if you suspect foul play in your husband's death, we could open a formal investigation. I had more than suspicions. I was certain my own sons had murdered their father for money. That afternoon, Malik came home with a bouquet of flowers and the same fake smile as Darius. How are you, Mom? You look tired. I'm fine, I lied, observing his every gesture from a new perspective. I'm just thinking about the future. That's good. Darius and I have been talking. We think you should sell the house soon while the market is hot. Why the rush? Well, old houses lose value quickly, and you need liquidity. Funeral expenses, pending medical bills. More lies. The funeral had been cheap, almost insultingly so, and there were no pending medical bills because the hospital insurance had covered them. Malik, I said, looking him directly in the eyes, you knew your dad didn't die from a work accident. For a fraction of a second, I saw panic in his expression, but he recovered quickly. What are you talking about, Mom? I went to the police station. There's no report of an explosion at your dad's shop. This time, the panic was more evident. Mom, you shouldn't be doing things like that. They'll confuse you. The grief is getting to you. The grief is getting to me, or you've been lying to me. He stood abruptly, spilling the coffee I'd poured for him. I think you need to rest. We'll talk when you're calmer. He left quickly, but not before making a phone call from the porch, though I couldn't hear the words. The tone was urgent, worried. That night, I received the most revealing message yet. They're coming together tomorrow. They're going to try to convince you that you're crazy, that grief is making you imagine things. Don't believe them and don't take anything they offer you to eat or drink. The mysterious message's prediction came true, exactly as warned. The next day, Darius and Malik arrived at my house together, accompanied by Shanice. They wore expressions of exaggerated concern and carried a bag of pastries from the downtown bakery. Mom, we're so worried about you, Darius began in a sugary voice. The neighbors have told us you've been acting strange. Miss Thelma says you've been talking to yourself, that you aren't eating well. Miss Thelma had never said that. Just another lie in their growing collection. Shanice brought your favorite pastries, Malik added, pointing to the bag. And we made special coffee from that brand you like so much. I remembered the message's words. Don't take anything they offer you to eat or drink. It was possible they were planning to poison me, too, just as they had Clarence. Thank you, but I already had breakfast, I said, keeping my distance. But Mom, Shanice insisted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You need to eat properly. You've lost a lot of weight since Dad died. I'm fine, I repeated firmly. Darius exchanged a significant look with Malik, the same look they'd shared at the hospital when the doctor gave us Clarence's prognosis. Mom, Darius said, sitting closer to me. We want to talk to you about something important. Malik and I have been consulting with some doctors about your recent behavior. My behavior? Yes. The strange questions you've been asking. The visits to the police station, that obsession with irrelevant details about Dad. It's normal after such a great loss, but it can be dangerous if it's not treated. Malik nodded gravely. We spoke to Dr. Albright. He says it's common for older people to develop paranoia after losing a partner, especially women your age. Paranoia. They were accusing me of being crazy for uncovering their lies. I am not paranoid, I said with all the firmness I could muster. I'm just asking questions I should have asked from the beginning. What questions? Darius challenged me. Like why there's no police report for your father's supposed accident. Like why the shop is perfectly clean if there was an explosion. Like why you withdrew $5,000 from our account without telling me anything. The silence that followed was deafening. The three of them exchanged looks of thinly disguised panic. Mom, Malik finally said, "Those things have simple explanations. Dad withdrew that money for repairs he wanted to do in secret as a surprise for you." "What surprise?" "He wanted to remodel the house." Darius lied. "He'd hired some workers to fix the roof and paint the walls. He wanted it to be a surprise for my birthday." If that were true, where were the workers? Where were the materials? Why did no one in town know about this supposed remodeling? And about the police report, Darius continued. "Not all work accidents require a report, especially when they happen on private property." More lies. Sergeant O'Connell had been very clear. Any work accident with serious injuries requires an official report. "Mom," Shanice intervened with a sweet but condescending voice. "We just want to take care of you. That's why we thought it would be best if you moved to a place with specialized medical attention." "A home, a specialized care home," Darius corrected, "for people who are going through complicated grief. They have psychologists, nurses, activities to keep you busy." "And in the meantime," Malik added, "we can take care of selling the house, managing the insurance money, all those complicated things you shouldn't have to handle in your current state." There it was, the complete plan. Declare me mentally incompetent, put me in a home, and take control of all my money. First, they'd murdered Clarence for the insurance money, and now they wanted to steal from me, too. And what if I refuse? I asked them. "Why would you refuse?" Darius asked with a smile that sent a chill through me. "We just want what's best for you. Because this is my house. This is where I built my life with Clarence. This is where I raised you." "Mom," Malik said with an exaggerated sigh, "you can't live in the past forever. Dad is gone. You have to accept it and move on." "I have accepted it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to give away my life and my money." The mask of concern began to crack on my sons' faces. Darius got up abruptly. "All right. If you won't listen to reason, we'll have to take more drastic measures." "What does that mean?" "It means we can start a legal process to have you declared mentally incompetent. We have witnesses to your erratic behavior. We have testimony from doctors who confirm you're suffering from senile paranoia." "Doctors? What doctors?" I hadn't spoken to any doctors about my mental state. "Dr. Albright already signed a preliminary report," Malik added. "He says that based on our descriptions of your behavior, it's likely you need specialized care." A doctor who had never examined me had signed a report about my mental state based only on what my sons had told him. How much had it cost them to buy that false evaluation? "So, you can cooperate voluntarily," Darius continued. "Or we can do it legally, but either way, you're going to get the help you need." It was a direct threat. If I didn't hand over my money voluntarily, they would use the legal system to steal it from me. "I need time to think about it," I told them, trying to buy time. "Of course," Shanice said with her false sweetness, "but not too much time. For your own good." After they left, I sat in my kitchen, trembling with rage and fear. My own sons, the blood of my blood, had not only murdered their father, but now they were planning to steal everything I had left. That night, my phone vibrated with a message longer than the others. "Loretta, this is Detective Raynard Carter, a private investigator. Clarence hired me 3 weeks before he died because he was suspicious of Darius and Malik. They poisoned him with methanol mixed in his breakfast coffee. I have audio evidence of their conversations, planning everything. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, go to the corner cafe. Sit at the back table. I'll be there." At last, I would know who had been sending me those messages, and more importantly, I would have the proof I needed to get justice for my husband's death. But I also knew I didn't have much time. Darius and Malik had shown their hand. If I didn't act fast, I'd end up locked in a home while they spent the money that had cost Clarence his life. The war had begun. And even if I was a 66-year-old woman against 2 ruthless men, I had something they didn't: the truth. And the truth, sooner or later, always finds a way to come out. That night, for the first time since Clarence's death, I smiled because I knew my husband had not died in vain. His caution, his instinct, his decision to hire a private investigator was going to allow me to get justice. Darius and Malik had seriously underestimated their mother. They were about to discover that a woman fighting for the memory of her murdered husband is a force more powerful than all their greed combined. The next day arrived, filled with nervousness and anticipation. I dressed carefully, choosing my most serious purple dress, the one I wore for important occasions. If I was going to meet the man who could give me the answers I needed, I wanted to be prepared for any revelation. At 2:30 in the afternoon, I walked toward the corner cafe with determined but cautious steps. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every person on the street could be a spy sent by my sons. The paranoia they had accused me of having was starting to feel justified. The cafe was moderately full. I went straight to the back table as instructed. I ordered a chamomile tea and waited, my hands trembling slightly on the worn wooden table. Exactly at 3 o'clock on the dot, a man in his 50s approached my table. He was tall and gray-haired with intelligent eyes and a serious, but kind expression. He was carrying a brown folder under his arm. "Mrs. Hayes?" he asked in a low voice. I nodded, not yet trusting my voice. "I'm Detective Reynard Carter. I'm so sorry for your loss." Clarence was a good man. He sat down across from me and placed the folder on the table. "Before I show you what I have, I need you to know that what you're about to hear and see is going to be very painful. Are you ready?" "I've been getting ready since I received your first message," I replied with a firmness I didn't know I had. Reynard opened the folder and took out a small voice recorder. "Clarence came to see me a month ago. He was worried about his son's behavior. He hired me to investigate them discreetly." He pressed the play button. Clarence's voice, so familiar and dear, filled the small space between us. "Reynard, I need you to know that if something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Darius and Malik have been pressuring me to increase my life insurance. Yesterday, Darius brought me papers he said were to better protect Loretta. But when I read them, I realized there were also clauses that directly benefited them. My heart sped up. Hearing Clarence's voice was like having him back for a few minutes, but his words confirmed my worst suspicions. The recording continued. "Malik has been asking strange questions about my daily routine, what I eat for breakfast, what time I leave the house, if Loretta comes to the shop with me. He says it's out of concern, but something about the way he asks worries me." Reynard paused the recording. This conversation was 3 weeks before his death, but I have something more recent. He played another recording, this time with Darius's voice in the background talking on the phone. "No, we can't wait any longer. The old man is starting to get suspicious. Yesterday, he asked me why I was so interested in his insurance. Yes, I already have the methanol. It works perfectly because the symptoms look like a heart attack or a stroke. No, Mom won't be a problem. After Dad dies, she'll be so devastated that we can do whatever we want with her." Tears began to roll down my cheeks. It was the voice of my son, my own son, coldly planning his father's murder. "There's more," Reynard said softly. "This recording is from the day before Clarence's death." A new recording began. This time it was Malik talking to someone. "Everything's ready. Tomorrow, Darius is going to put the methanol in Dad's coffee. We told him it was a special vitamin supplement a doctor recommended. The idiot is going to drink it without suspecting a thing. The symptoms, it'll start with dizziness and confusion, then loss of sight, convulsions, coma. The doctors will think it's a stroke or a heart attack. By the time they realize it's poisoning, it'll be too late." My world completely collapsed. Not only had they planned Clarence's murder, but they had executed it with a coldness that terrified me. How was it possible that my sons, the babies? I couldn't believe it. The boys I'd nurtured, the lads I'd soothed through their childhood nightmares, were capable of such a monstrous act. "How did you get these recordings?" I choked out, tears streaming down my face. Reynard explained, "Clarence asked me to bug your house. He was scared, though he wasn't sure of what. They'd placed listening devices on the home phone and in a few other strategic spots. He pulled out a series of photos from the file. I've also got this. Darius buying methanol at the hardware store, 30 meters outside of town. Paid cash, used a fake name, but I've got it on video. The photos clearly showed Darius leaving the hardware store, a small bottle clutched in his hand. The date on the photos? 5 days before Clarence died. And this, Reynard continued, showing me more documents. These are Darius and Malik's financial records from the last 6 months. They've been spending way more than they earn. Darius owes 70 grand to a city lender. Malik's got 40,000 in gambling debts. They were desperate. It all started to click into place. It wasn't just greed that fueled Clarence's murder. It was sheer, desperate financial ruin. My sons were broke, and they saw their father as a quick and easy cash cow. Why didn't you go to the police straight away after Clarence died? I asked him. Because Darius and Malik are bloody smart. They bribed the doctor who treated Clarence at the hospital to change the official diagnosis. Instead of poisoning, the death certificate says heart failure due to complications from a work accident. Without that medical evidence, my recordings might not have been enough for a conviction. But now we've got everything together, I said, a mixture of agony and fierce resolve welling up inside me. Exactly, Reynard agreed. And there's one more thing you need to know. A chill ran down my spine. What? Your sons were planning to kill you too. Reynard played another recording, this time featuring Darius and Malik's voices together. Once we've got Dad's insurance money, we need to get rid of Mom, too, Darius said. We can't risk her getting suspicious, or anyone else putting ideas in her head. How? Malik asked. Same as Dad. But this time, we can make it look like a suicide, depression. A widow who can't live without her husband. No one would question it. And the money? We're her only heirs. Everything would be ours. The house, the savings, the insurance money. Nearly $200,000 in total. The recording ended. I was shaking uncontrollably. My sons hadn't just murdered their father, they'd planned to murder me as well. All for money. We'll make them pay, Mrs. Hayes, Reynard said gently. I know this is devastating, but we've got enough evidence to nail them. What do we do now? I asked, wiping away my tears. First, we go to the police with all this. Sergeant Williams is a straight shooter. He's not involved in the corruption. Second, we need to move fast. Your sons are planning to have you declared mentally incompetent tomorrow. If they succeed, it'll be a whole lot harder to proceed legally. Yes, Reynard said. I intercepted a phone call this morning. They're meeting with Judge Robinson at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to start the process. I pushed myself away from the table, a surge of determination I hadn't felt in weeks coursing through me. Then we have to act tonight. Exactly, Reynard confirmed. But first, there's one more thing I want to show you. He produced another photograph. It showed Clarence leaving a medical clinic I didn't recognize. 3 days before he died, your husband went for a full medical checkup at a clinic in the city. The results show he was perfectly healthy. No signs of heart disease. His blood pressure was normal. Everything was perfect. This definitively proves his death was caused by poisoning, not natural causes. That was the final piece of the puzzle. Clarence had been a healthy man, murdered by his own sons. Reynard, I said, taking his hand. Thank you for keeping your promise to my husband. Now let's get justice. That night, Reynard and I went straight to the police station. Sergeant Williams was on the night shift that week. Perfect timing. When we arrived, it was 8 o'clock, and the station was relatively quiet. Sergeant Williams, I said, my voice firm. I need to file a formal complaint. The murder of my husband, Clarence. The sergeant looked at me surprised. Murder? Mrs. Hayes? The death certificate says he died from heart complications after a work accident. The death certificate's false, I replied, placing Reynard's file on his desk. My husband was deliberately poisoned with methanol by our own sons. For the next 2 hours, Reynard and I presented all the evidence. The audio recordings, the photos of Darius buying methanol, the bank statements showing the dodgy withdrawals, Clarence's medical results proving his perfect health, and finally, the recordings where my sons confessed to both their father's murder and their plans to kill me. Sergeant Williams listened to each recording, his expression growing increasingly grim. When we finished, he leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. This is monstrous," he murmured. "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mrs. Hayes? Once we arrest your sons, there's no turning back." "Sergeant," I replied, summoning every ounce of dignity I possessed, "those men murdered my husband in cold blood for money. They were planning to murder me, too. They're no longer my sons. They're criminals who must pay for their crimes. We'll need the medical examiner to exhume Clarence's body to confirm the presence of methanol," the sergeant explained. "Are you prepared for that?" "Do whatever's necessary," I replied without hesitation. Sergeant Williams immediately called the district attorney. Despite the late hour, the seriousness of the case prompted the DA to come to the station personally. After reviewing the evidence, he immediately authorized arrest warrants for Darius and Malik. "We'll proceed at dawn," the DA explained. "We need to make sure we have all the evidence before they can destroy any more." Reynard walked me home that night. "Are you sure you'll be all right alone?" he asked, concerned. "I'll be fine," I replied. "After everything I've discovered, I'm no longer afraid. I've got justice on my side." I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, looking at the photos of Clarence we had on the walls. For the first time since his death, I didn't feel only pain. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and a grim satisfaction, knowing that justice for his murder was imminent. At 6 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang. It was Darius. "Mom, you need to come to Malik's place right away. Something terrible's happened." "What happened?" I asked, feigning concern. "It's better if I explain it in person. Please come quickly." I knew it was a trap. After hearing the recordings the night before, I knew they were bringing their plans to get rid of me forward. But I also knew the police were already on their way to arrest them. "I'm on my way," I lied. Instead of going to Malik's house, I stayed in my kitchen, waiting. At 7:30 in the morning, I saw from my window several police cars heading towards my sons' houses in different directions. My phone rang repeatedly for the next hour. First Darius, then Malik, both with increasingly desperate voices asking where I was, but I didn't answer. At 9 o'clock, Sergeant Williams knocked on my door. "Mrs. Hayes, we've arrested Darius and Malik. They're in custody, charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder." My legs trembled violently, not from fear, but from the sheer shock of relief, like a prisoner hearing the cell doors swing open after a lifetime behind bars. "How did they react?" I asked. Darius denied everything at first, but when we played the recordings for him, he collapsed. Malik tried to escape through the back window of his house. We had to chase him for 6 blocks. That afternoon, Shanice came to see me. She arrived sobbing, pleading, a completely different woman from the cold, calculating person I'd known. "Mrs. Hayes, please, you have to drop the charges against Darius. He's not bad. He was just desperate because of his debts. This is my fault, too. I pressured him a lot to find money." I looked at her without a trace of compassion. "Shanice, your husband poisoned my husband. He was planning to murder me, too. There's no explanation or justification for that. But we're family." She screamed in desperation. "Think about what this is going to do to the family." "The family died the day you decided to kill Clarence for money," I replied coldly. "Now, please leave my house." 3 days later, Clarence's body was exhumed. The lab results confirmed exactly what Reynard had discovered: lethal levels of methanol in his system, enough to cause all the symptoms he'd experienced before his death. The case became a sensation throughout the town. No one could believe that 2 sons had murdered their own father for money. The local papers called it the cruelest crime of the decade. Over the following weeks, more details emerged during the investigation. Darius really did owe $7,000 to loan sharks who'd started threatening him with violence. Malik had lost $5,000 in underground gambling dens and was also facing threats. They'd seen Clarence's life insurance money as their only salvation. But their greed had led them to inflate the policies so dramatically that it had aroused their father's suspicions. We also discovered that the doctor who'd falsified the death certificate had received $5,000 in cash from Darius. He was also arrested for perverting the course of justice and falsifying official documents. Reynard explained the details of the plan Clarence had made with him. Your husband was smarter than his sons believed. He knew something bad was coming, but he didn't know exactly what. He hired me not only to investigate Darius and Malik, but also to protect you if something happened to him. Did he know they were going to kill him? I asked. Not exactly, Reynard said. But he suspected his life was in danger. That's why we installed the recording devices. That's why we documented everything. He wanted to make sure that if something happened to him, the truth would come out. My Clarence, even in his final days, had been protecting me. He'd anticipated his son's betrayal and taken steps to ensure justice would prevail. The trial was scheduled to begin in 2 months. Both Darius and Malik faced charges of first-degree murder, which in our state carried a sentence of 25 years to life. The day of the trial arrived after 2 months of intense legal preparation. The courtroom was packed. Reporters from several regional newspapers had come to cover what was already being dubbed the Killer Sons case. The whole town was there. Neighbors, Clarence's former workmates, even people I barely knew but who wanted to witness this historic moment of justice. I wore my best black dress, the same one I'd worn to our wedding all those years ago, but which now represented both mourning and dignity. Reynard accompanied me, sitting beside me throughout the entire process. His presence gave me the strength to face what would be the most difficult day of my life. Darius and Malik entered the courtroom in handcuffs, dressed in orange prison jumpsuits. Seeing my sons like that broke my heart again, but I no longer felt pity for them. I only felt a deep sadness for the moral death they'd chosen long before they physically murdered their father. The prosecutor presented the case with devastating precision. One by one, the recordings were played for the court. The silence was absolute each time the voices of Darius and Malik were heard, coldly plotting Clarence's murder. When the prosecutor played the recording where they planned to kill me, too, several people in the audience gasped in horror. One elderly woman stood up and left the courtroom, crying. I couldn't blame her. It was hard to comprehend such cruelty. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor said during his opening statement, this isn't an ordinary case of family greed. This is a case of cold, calculated premeditation, where 2 men decided to murder the father who'd raised them with love and sacrifice, simply because they needed money to pay off their gambling debts and irresponsible loans. Darius and Malik's lawyers tried to mount a defense based on desperate circumstances and outside pressures, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings didn't lie. The bank statements didn't lie. The forensic evidence of the methanol in Clarence's body didn't lie. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with trembling legs, but a clear mind. I'd been waiting for this moment for months. Mrs. Hayes, the prosecutor asked me, can you tell us what your relationship was like with your sons before your husband's murder? I thought I had a good relationship with them, I replied, looking directly at Darius and Malik. I raised them with love. I sacrificed everything for their well-being. Their father worked his fingers to the bone to give them the best we could. I never imagined that love and sacrifice would become the reason for his murder. At any point, did you suspect they could harm your husband? No. That's the most painful part of all this. I trusted them completely. When they told me Clarence had an accident at his shop, I believed them. When they organized the funeral so quickly, I thought they were being efficient in their grief. I never imagined they were covering up a murder. Darius lowered his head during my testimony. Malik looked at me defiantly, but I saw tears in his eyes. Too late for tears. Too late for regret. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when the prosecutor decided to play the full recording of the conversation where they planned my own murder. Darius's voice filled the courtroom. Once we've got Dad's insurance money, we need to get rid of Mom, too. We can't risk her getting suspicious. A murmur of horror swept through the audience. Several people turned to look at me with expressions of disbelief and compassion. How did you feel when you heard this recording for the first time? The prosecutor asked me. I realized that I'd lost my 2 sons long before I lost my husband, I replied, my voice cracking but firm. The babies I nursed, the children I comforted in their nightmares, had died and been replaced by 2 strangers capable of any cruelty for money. The defense tried to cross-examine me, suggesting that maybe I'd misinterpreted my son's intentions, that maybe grief had made me exaggerate the evidence, but the recordings spoke for themselves. Reynard also testified, explaining in detail how Clarence had hired him because he was afraid of his own sons. He described every step of the investigation, every piece of evidence collected, every recorded moment that revealed the truth. The medical examiner presented the results of the exhumation, confirming the lethal presence of methanol in Clarence's body. He explained how this poison acts slowly, causing exactly the symptoms my husband had experienced before he died. After 3 days of devastating testimony, the closing arguments arrived. The prosecutor was devastating. Darius and Malik are not victims of circumstances. They are predators who saw their own parents as financial obstacles that had to be eliminated. They planned, executed, and covered up Clarence's murder and were planning to do the same to Loretta. They don't deserve compassion. They deserve justice. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. I could hear the beating of my own heart as the judge read the verdict. In the case of the state versus Darius Hayes and Malik Hayes on the charge of first-degree murder of Clarence Jackson, we find the defendants guilty. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Darius collapsed in his chair, finally comprehending the magnitude of what he'd done. Malik remained rigid, staring straight ahead, expressionless. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder against Loretta Jackson, we find the defendants guilty. The judge proceeded immediately to sentencing. Darius Hayes and Malik Hayes, for the premeditated murder of your father and the conspiracy to murder your mother, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 30 years. When I heard those words, I felt a gigantic weight lift from my shoulders. Justice. Finally, there was justice for Clarence. After the trial, many people came up to hug me and express their support. Miss Thelma cried with me, not from sadness, but from relief. Loretta, Clarence can rest in peace now, she whispered to me. That night, I returned to my house, which now felt different. It was no longer a place of pain and betrayal. It was my home again, the place where Clarence and I had been happy for 42 years. Reynard came to visit me a week after the trial. How are you feeling? He asked me. At peace, I answered honestly. For the first time since Clarence's death, I'm sleeping soundly. I know he's resting because his death wasn't unpunished. And the money, the insurance, the savings? I donated the life insurance money to a foundation for victims of family crimes, I explained. That money was stained with blood. I could never have used it. My personal savings are enough to live modestly for the rest of my days. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter in prison mail. It was from Darius. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I regret everything. The money, the debts, the desperation. They blinded us. We lost all humanity. Malik and I destroyed the most loving family in the world for $5,000 that we didn't even get to enjoy. Tomorrow, I will commit suicide in my cell. I can't live with what we did. Take care, Mom. Tell Dad we're sorry we were such bad sons. I didn't arrive in time to prevent his suicide. Darius was found hanging in his cell the next day. Malik, Upon learning of his brother's death, suffered a complete nervous breakdown and was transferred to the prison psychiatric hospital. Today, 2 years after the trial, I live peacefully in my small house. I've converted Clarence's shop into a garden where I grow flowers to take to his grave every Sunday. Reynard has become a close friend, visiting me regularly to make sure I'm okay. Sometimes the neighbors ask me if I miss my sons. The answer is complicated. I miss the children they were, but those children died long before Clarence did. The men they became were not my sons. They were strangers who shared my blood, but not my heart. I've learned that true family isn't defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and mutual respect. Clarence was my true family for 42 years. The friends who supported me during the trial are my family now. Justice didn't bring Clarence back, but it gave me peace. And on quiet nights, when I sit on the porch where we so often drank coffee together, I swear I can feel his presence, proud of me for being strong enough to do the right thing, even when it meant losing my sons forever. 5 years have passed since that terrible day in the cemetery when I received the first message that changed my life forever. Today I am 71 years old, and my completely white hair reflects all the storms I have faced and overcome. But my eyes, my dear friend Miss Thelma tells me, shine with a light they didn't have before. The house where Clarence and I built our dreams is still my refuge. I've made some improvements with the money I had saved. I painted the walls a soft yellow, Clarence's favorite color, and I turned his old shop into the most beautiful garden in the neighborhood. Red roses, white carnations, sunflowers that always seek the sun, just as he taught me to do during our most difficult years. Detective Reynard Carter became more than just the investigator who helped me get justice. He became my chosen family. He comes to visit me every Wednesday afternoon, and we drink coffee on the porch while he tells me stories about his other cases. He sometimes asks me if I regret reporting my own sons, if it wouldn't have been better to keep the secret and live with the lie. Never, I always answer. The truth hurts, but lies kill the soul. The foundation I established with the life insurance money has become something bigger than I ever imagined. The Clarence Jackson Foundation for Victims of Family Crimes now helps dozens of families every year who have gone through tragedies similar to mine. We have psychologists, lawyers, and private investigators all working so that no other family has to suffer in silence what I suffered. 6 months ago, a 40-year-old woman came to see me. Her name was Eleanor, and she suspected her brother had murdered her mother for the inheritance. Her story was painfully similar to mine: greedy relatives, pressure to sell properties, strange behavior after the death. The foundation provided her with a private investigator, free legal advice, and psychological support throughout the process. When her brother was convicted of murder 3 months later, Eleanor came to hug me, crying, "Mrs. Hayes, you saved my life. If you hadn't had the courage to report your own sons, I never would have had the courage to report mine." Those are the moments that remind me why all the pain I went through was worth it. Malik is still alive, though he's no longer the same man I knew. After Darius's suicide, his mind completely broke. The doctors say he lives in a constant state of guilt and paranoia, believing that Clarence comes to visit him every night to scold him for the murder. He's tried to commit suicide 3 times, but the prison guards keep him under constant surveillance. I receive letters from him occasionally. They're incoherent, full of desperate apologies and pleas for forgiveness. At first, I read them, looking for some trace of the son I raised with so much love. But then I realized that reading those letters only reopens wounds that have already healed. Now I keep them unopened in a shoebox. Maybe someday I'll read them. Maybe not. I have the right to protect my peace of mind. Shanice disappeared from town immediately after the trial. Someone told me she moved to the city and changed her name. I don't blame her. Carrying the last name of a murderer must not be easy. Sometimes I wonder if she knew what Darius was planning, if she was a silent accomplice to Clarence's murder. But those questions belong to the past, and I've learned to live in the present. The town of Spring Creek will never forget the case. It's become a local legend, a story that parents tell their children as a warning about greed and betrayal. Some see me as a hero, others as a cruel woman who sent her own sons to prison. I don't care what they think anymore. I did what was right. I got justice for Clarence. And that's all that matters. I'm a woman who sent her own sons to prison. Their opinions don't matter to me. I know the truth, and that truth has brought me the peace I desperately needed. My health, considering my age, is surprisingly good. My doctor attributes it to finally releasing the stress and sadness I'd been carrying around for years. He said, during my last appointment, that the body heals when the heart finds peace. Sundays are my favorite. I cut fresh flowers from the garden and walked to the cemetery to visit Clarence's grave. His headstone now bears an inscription I had added after the trial: Clarence Jackson, beloved husband, betrayed father, honorable man. His love was stronger than death itself. I tell him everything that's happened during the week. I talk about the foundation, the families we've helped, and the thank you letters I receive from people who've found justice thanks to our story. I swear I can feel his approval in the gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the nearby trees. Do you know the strangest thing, my love? I said during my last visit. I no longer feel pain when I think of Darius and Malik. I only feel pity. Pity, because they had everything, all the love in the world, and they chose hate. They had a family that adored them, and they chose betrayal. They had the chance to be honorable men, just like you, and they chose to be murderers. Last week, a reporter from the city interviewed me for a documentary about family crimes. She asked if I had a message for others going through similar ordeals. Family is no excuse for crime, I replied. Love isn't blind. Love with boundaries is true love. If someone claiming to love you is capable of harming you for money or convenience, that's not love. And it's never too late to seek justice, no matter who the perpetrator is. This year, on the 5th anniversary of Clarence's death, I organized a special memorial ceremony. Over 200 people attended, neighbors, members of the foundation, families we've helped, and local officials. It was beautiful to see how his death, initially a tragedy, had become a catalyst for good in so many lives. Reynard gave a truly moving speech. He spoke of how Clarence Jackson died because of his son's greed, but how his legacy lives on in every family that finds justice thanks to his wife's courage. Evil tried to destroy his story, but good transformed it into a beacon of hope for others. At night, before bed, I sometimes look at old photographs of Darius and Malik as children. I see them playing in the yard, hugging their father, laughing with me at Christmases past. I let myself cry for those innocent children who existed before greed completely consumed them. But I no longer cry for the men they became. Those men chose their own fate. My story has transcended my personal tragedy. It's become a symbol, proof that justice is possible, even from the most unexpected places. A 66-year-old widow demonstrated that truth is mightier than lies, that true love conquers betrayal, and that it's never too late to do the right thing. Tomorrow's Wednesday, and Reynard will be here for coffee, as always. I'll make his favorite pastry and tell him about the thank you letters that arrived this week. Afterwards, we'll work together in the garden, planting new flowers for spring. Life goes on, simpler but more genuine than before. I've learned that true family isn't about shared blood, but shared values, mutual respect, and a love that never causes harm. Clarence, wherever you are, I hope you know I kept the promise I made at your grave that awful day. I found the truth. I sought justice, and I transformed our pain into hope for others. Your death was not in vain, my love. Did you enjoy my story? And what city are you listening from? Let's chat in the comments. If you liked it, you can show your support with a super thanks. It helps me keep sharing stories like this one. Thank you so much for your wonderful support. I look forward to reading your comments. You'll find 2 new life stories on the screen that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.